We are here, we are queer, and we're changing the world for the better.
Welcome to Queer Changemakers. Today, our guest is Claire Jones. And just to start, would you like to give a short introduction of yourself?
Yeah. Happy to be here. I'm Claire Jones. I'm an author and small publisher. I'm committed to changing the world for the better through inclusive stories and practices. So I write fiction and nonfiction, novels, planners, journals, workbooks, all the books.
Awesome. Sounds good. So in Queer Changemakers, my hope with this is to share stories of people and sharing their visions for the next level of our LGBTQ plus community. So when it comes to our community, what is a vision you have for the future?
Yeah, that's actually something that I work on a lot in the fiction that I write, particularly. I write fantasy romance, but with a DEI lens. And so I look at, not only gender diversity, ethnicity diversity, sexuality diversity, but also like disableism and ableism and how to approach those topics in my writing in a way that de-tokenizes the marginalized identity. Because I think that that's the next step for queer communities, for marginalized communities, is to not have the gay character, not have the Black character, not have the trans character, but rather create characters that also happen to be those things. Because we see that in media so often is like, this is the gay best friend, the sidekick that, tags along on every adventure and causes mishaps and all kinds of crazy, kooky things. And I think we need to move beyond that in the media that we consume.
Okay, that's awesome. So in along that lines, you mentioned that you are a fiction writer. So how many books have you done, or how's that been going for you?
Yeah, I did my debut novel, published it last year on Halloween, and I'm writing an 8-book series. And so book 2 is scheduled to publish this Halloween, and I've already started writing book 3.
Exciting. Are they scary books? Like what's the gist
A
of them?
little bit. It's fantasy romance, it's high fantasy, so it's a world that I entirely built myself. And the concept behind the world is that there's 8 classes of magic that are inherited from the gods of the world via bloodline. And so each of the powers is kind of like elementally connected, like fire, water, earth, plants, so on and so forth. And so each book is from a perspective of one of those magic wielders in the world.
Mhm.
And so book 1 follows the heroine who has the blessing of the goddess of death. And so she can see ghosts and interact more with those ethereal plane kind of beings. And she's bisexual in the book, and she has like 2 love interests. But I also wanted to provide a different take on tropes as well when it comes to fantasy romance. Like there is what you would call a love triangle framework set up within the book, but there's not a lot of jealousy that is produced as a result. Like the jealousy is not what drives the plot forward. It's more character growth that drives the plot forward. So, it does get spooky. There is like blood and murder and, like scary monsters and stuff, but it's not like horror fiction.
Okay, that's cool. It's just with the Halloween release date, it makes me just
That was more coincidental than anything. I was like, all right, the production timeline was leading up to it, and Halloween is just a good holiday. So I was like, sure, why not?
That's awesome. So what sort of got you into that? Like why, of all the things you can write,
Totally.
all that way?
I've been a creative since birth and a writer since age 7, honestly. My mom was an art teacher for 25 years, so every bone in my body is a creative bone. And once I learned language and reading and writing, I just absolutely fell in love with the way that humans communicate to one another. And falling into a love of reading very early on, I particularly gravitated towards fantasy and romance books. Like I started reading romance novels probably at a too early of an age. Like third grade was when I found my first romance novel. I found it in a rummage sale in a church basement for $1. And I don't know why the organizers let me buy it, but they did. And so over the years, I tried a bunch of different writing styles. Like in fifth grade, it was like really poorly written fan fiction. In high school, it was very angsty poetry, as one does as a teenager. And I ended up getting awards for it in high school. So apparently I was onto something. In college, I got my degree in art history. And so I started writing academic articles for academic journals and got published in those when I was in college. And that's when I started my public speaking career as well, because they trained you to be a lecturist when you're in art history, academia. And so I started doing public art lectures around that time. And then graduating from college, I tried writing my first nonfiction book. It was basically a life hacks book for 20-somethings, because like no one knows how to change a tire on their car. No one knows how to do their taxes. No one knows how to, do all these basic life adulting things. And so I figured I would write a book on that. And I got 50 pages in, and I started even querying agents for it. But I ran face first into depression that year and ended up just falling off the cliff, because it was like the deepest depression I'd ever run into. And so I kind of paused everything for about 10 years and went into entrepreneurship. And I realized, a couple of years ago that I spent all of that time doing business writing instead. I just didn't realize that that's what I was doing. Because I was writing operations manuals, I was writing legal agreements, I was writing, blog posts and emails and social media content campaigns and speeches and webinars and courses. Like I was still writing all of this content, but I didn't realize that that was the common denominator, is writing was really underlying all of that. And so I went through a bit of a existential crisis at the end of 2021. I realized that the work that I was doing was not fulfilling me, not tapping into my creative urges the way that I wanted them to, the way that I needed them to, honestly. And one of the first steps of getting out of that crisis for me was allowing myself to read for fun again. Because as a business owner, my reading list had become all nonfiction. Business books, psychology, personal development, marketing, and I wasn't reading for fun anymore. So I went back to fantasy and romance, because those were the genres that fulfilled me for so much of my childhood. And I just fell in love with it. And doing a bunch of reading, I also realized that I've read a lot of bad books over the years. I was like, there are books out there that are popular, that are beloved, that have like space on library shelves and bookstore shelves and have legitimate followings, where the editing is bad, or the ending doesn't make sense, or it just has very poor grammatical choices or character choices in it. And so finally one day I was like, I could probably do better than some of the bad books that I've read over the years.
Okay. So with that, since you brought it up, you don't have to name the book itself, but of the bad books that are out there in the fantasy romance genre, do you have a couple standouts that were just very good examples of bad?
It's hard to pick a specific example, because honestly, they faded into the obscurity of my memory. Like I read 112 books last year. And so it's hard to pick out particular ones, but I can say one of the recent book series that I've read, there were entire sentences missing from the formatting of the book. Like when you changed from the chapter title page to the next page, whoever did the formatting just often skipped the first line of that next page. And so that's just an example of bad formatting, bad editing. One of the books that I'm reading currently kind of sounds like an AI wrote it, because it's so repetitive. And each sentence is just a slightly different version of the sentence before it. And so it's hard to pick out any particular book, but those are examples of like the types of bad practices that I see in books.
Okay. I guess I was more wondering if there was like a story that wanted to make sense and then it just went out
Yeah,
into
I
the
mean,
deep
there's
end.
one series. Yeah, there was one series that I read last year that I rage finished it because I was so mad about how the series had gone. One of my most despised writing practices is when someone puts more than 4 points of view into the same book. So like if you're giving chapters that are from the point of view of different characters, it starts to get confusing if you do more than 4 characters that way. And it's you have to have a very high level of skill set in order to emotionally engage the reader in more than 4 characters, right? Because we don't always want to see the point of view from, the side character that we met back at that tavern 10 chapters ago, right?
Mhm.
And so this book had 8, 10 different points of views that it was doing in this series. And one of the other things that really pisses me off is time magic when we get to fantasy, because time magic cannot be often used as a deus ex machina, just like a very easy band-aid solution to a plot problem that you've made for yourself. Like, I'll just fix this plot hole with time magic. Like a lot of authors do that. Like, I'll just go back in time, put in a time machine, and like everything will be fixed because of this plot hole that I made for myself. And so that series not only had the multiple points of view, but also used time magic as a way to like fix the end of the series. And so at the end of the series, like the 2 people that I had been shipping this entire series never ended up getting together at the end because of time magic. And so like that's an example of like poor writing or writing bad practices that I've seen over the years.
Or just unfulfilling when you get to
Yeah,
it. So you're like,
totally.
well, we have to end this somehow.
Yeah,
Certain high series that were on television that are no longer here that were just like, wait, all of this whole time you could have.
totally.
It's okay. It's
Yeah.
a journey though. It's the journey.
Yeah.
So like on the other side of that, outside of your book series, obviously, are there any like highly recommended books from in the fantasy and romance category that you're like, if someone's going to start, they read your books every year when they're coming out, and then this other series would be a really good one?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not necessarily queer focused, but one of the best fantasy series that I've come across that is diversity focused is I'm trying to remember the name of it. Empire of Gold is the last book in the series, but I'm gonna just look it up real fast. It's by S.A. Chakraborty, and it's the Daevabad trilogy. I can't say that word. But it is a high fantasy series where all of the cultural references are based in Middle Eastern cultural references.
Oh, okay.
And so like all of the characters are Middle Eastern descent, and the magic classes of this world are very much like jinn based, like genie based, and like it's just very fascinating for me to find series that have these multicultural elements. Like I made a big effort last year to read people of color authors for especially fantasy series. And so I read African mythology series. I read Middle Eastern mythology series. I read Chinese mythology series. If you want to do the queer perspective with Chinese mythology, one of my favorite books from last year was Iron Widow by Jiran J. Zhao. And she very expertly weaves together queer concepts and queer personalities, but not tokenizing them within a science fiction framework that is influenced by Chinese mythology. And it is just fascinating. So there are tons of good books out there if you want to explore that kind of thing.
All right, that's awesome. That's awesome. I feel like over the past few years, I've been a part of a queer book club.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the books that we've read were specifically in certain places.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I didn't enjoy all of the book, it was sort of good. Like we read a book about, I think it's the life and death of Vivek Oji, which is like
Oh, I've heard of it. I haven't read it though. Yeah.
story. It was great. And there's another book we read, Young Mungo, that took place in like Scotland. Yeah, I think Scotland, and it was
Mm-hmm.
written for that. And I think it's good to see these, to hear of these queer stories, but also like to get the context of the culture.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes it's good just to see new experiences, new perspectives, and similar themes.
I love exploring mythologies from different parts of the world, like the way that they create their belief systems, like the African mythology system. It's called Skin of the Sea by Natasha Bowen, and it was based on the mythology around mermaids in Africa.
Yeah.
And how they are influenced by the African gods and things like that. And that was it was beautifully written, absolutely fascinating, just a great series too. I think it's a duology. I don't think it's a series, but.
Okay, that sounds definitely interesting. And I think sometimes my background's like from a Christian tradition, a more conservative Christian tradition. And I think sometimes there's this idea that like, no, we have the truth and other people don't. But then when you start like looking more, it's like, wait a minute, why do some of your stories sound like some of our stories?
Absolutely.
But they weren't connected. And it's like, wait, is this just like a human response to life?
Yeah.
And it can be very interesting. And some people may not be able to have those kinds of conversations. But
Yeah.
I can appreciate it because like we're all people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fun. That's fun.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I appreciate you sharing this, the diversity that you proactively went through last year. Like I want to make sure I open my mind up and see these things.
Because I was tired of reading the same story time and time again, because that's really easy to come across in fantasy and romance in particular. Like those two genres have been very heteronormative, cisgendered, straight white male for decades at this point. And it's just been within the last 10 years. Like, yes, there's been gay fantasy, queer fantasy coming out since the 80s, right? But it hasn't really hit mass market appeal until recently. And like I saw a report the other day by a massive consumer research group that was saying that the desire for queer content in the media is higher than the amount of queer media that's out there right now.
Okay, that's awesome.
So like more consumers are demanding more queer content, but the production companies just aren't fulfilling that need satisfactorily yet. And so I think that's going to be the next wave of media that we're seeing, because representation matters and our culture, our demographics are changing.
Okay. It's two different directions to go with that. Because on the one side, there's actually, no, I'm just going to go where I wanted to go. With that, you mentioned there is that gap in what's produced and what people want. So let's say there is someone who may listen to this who may, have an idea for a story, or might like be like, "Ooh, be cool this." But it's just an idea, and like to make it real, there's, I assume, a lot more steps and effort that has to take. So like if someone had an idea for a story, what would you suggest to them to like flesh that out, or just to see what they can make from it?
I mean, honestly, we start with what your goal is. Like, do you just want to put the story out in the world and you don't care making money off of it. You don't care whether it brings you fame and fortune and all of attention and all of that jazz. Like if that's just your goal to put the story out there, write fan fiction, put it up on Tumblr, put it up on, Wattpad or any of those other more casual story sharing sites, right? Because you're just trying to put the story out there. If you're just trying to share that story with the world, that's a great way to do it. If you're looking to monetize it, if you're looking to create a career out of it, then think about whether you want to pursue self-publishing or traditional publishing. I'm one of those people that prefers self-publishing because it offers a lot more control, and I'm an efficiency nerd at the end of the day, and it takes a lot less time to do self-publishing than traditional. But some people feel more comfortable with the support system that traditional provides. You don't have to do everything yourself. You don't have to look for your editor. You don't have to manage your cover designer and deal with all of the marketing. I mean, you still have to deal with all of the marketing mostly with traditional publishing, but you really just need to start with your goal in it all.
Okay. That's a good way to put it. So in your journey, so your books have been self-published.
Mhm.
So in your process, so either publishing the books or getting to where you are now,
Mhm.
what's like one of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome in this process or in your journey of life to this moment?
I think one of the funniest obstacles that I've come across is people taking me seriously when I say that I'm an author full time.
Okay. All right. So the obstacle is them not taking you seriously.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Because I do a lot of business networking. I've been a business consultant for about 5 years. And so that is my primary form of marketing nowadays. And it's a very high returning form of marketing. I recommend it to anyone for their strategies. But I often run into business owners and entrepreneurs who sell services, and they're used to coming across book coaches and author coaches, people who like have coaching programs for aspiring authors. When I just sell products, I just sell books. And there's a lot of people that just cannot comprehend it, which is really funny on my end.
Okay. So it's just to make sure I get it. So like they expect you to be coach person teaching me this, and you're just like, book, here's a link, go get it. And they're like, but
Yeah. And like I just see like the wheels trying to turn in their head as I'm talking to them, trying to find some understanding of what I'm telling them. But I mean, like, if I had to boil that obstacle down to one thing, is people's preconceived notions of things are obstacles, right?
yeah.
Like they are going to see the world through a certain lens. People are going to view you and your work through a certain lens, and you can't control that lens. That lens is completely up to them. And so one of my biggest obstacles when I'm talking to people, when I'm going down this path, is trying to get past that lens, trying to get past those preconceived notions that they have of me, of my work, of writing in general. Like I've had to kind of disrupt their thinking patterns often because they don't even realize how big of an industry romance novels are in the first place. Like it's $1 billion industry. The top performing fantasy romance writer right now makes $400,000 a month off of Amazon sales alone.
Wow.
That doesn't include Barnes & Noble. That doesn't include Target. That doesn't include everywhere else that sells her books. Only from Amazon alone, she makes $400,000 a month. And so I spend a lot of my time also educating people on the industry of authorship, because people don't understand. We are brainwashed by the starving artist trope, right? And that's one of the biggest obstacles that I have to surpass when I'm talking to new people about this, because they just have preconceived notions of what is profitable and what is not profitable. They see author coaches as profitable. They do not see authors as profitable.
Okay. So I feel like on one side, there's a starving artist trope.
Hmm.
And on another side, sometimes people have the idea that I'm going to write this perfect book and it's going to make me like it's going to do everything on
Yeah.
its own. Um, I don't know if that part is true for the average person, but like, what would you say is like the standard, or how to, right? Like neither of those may be most realistic. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's
it's easy to
somewhere
be
in
a
the
starving
middle,
artist,
right? It's
but
going to be
like,
somewhere in the middle.
mhm,
Like, you have to divorce yourself of this another preconception that your art is going to speak for itself. That's the biggest issue that I find with people who come from the creative background versus the business background. Like, there's two preconception camps, right? There's the creative background and there's the business background. The business background people don't believe that writing is profitable. The creative background is holding on to that pipe dream that they're going to become the next Banksy, because that's what is portrayed in media. Again, we're coming back to representation matters, right?
Yeah.
So the creatives see the representation of these overnight sensations. They see the Colleen Hoovers of the writing world. They see the, massive successes of the 8-figure traditional publishing contracts that go to like the Obamas, that go to Harry, Prince Harry, with his Spare book that he came out with recently. Like, those are the people that get the 8-figure contracts from traditional publishing companies. And so it's always going to be somewhere in the middle, right? Like, you have to treat, in order to get to that phase, you either have to be really good at marketing, really good at selling, or have a pre-established brand presence.
okay.
Because if you have the pre-established brand presence, that's what's going to sell the book. Because people buy into you as the creator, not the creative piece. And that's the gap that I think is most missing for most creators, is that they think they can rise from complete obscurity to New York Times bestseller, when really you need to be like influencer New York Times bestseller.
Okay. That's cool.
Or you need to go from obscurity to influencer and then New York Times bestseller.
Okay, all right. So like, so again, for this theoretical person who's super just starting,
Mm-hmm.
do you have any hints or tips that they can use to think about, okay, I am random person, have my network around me wherever I live. I need, in order to do this book and for it to be successful, and for me to put in this time that it will take, I need that audience. I need to become some level of influencer, right? What could they, how can they, do you have any tips for that?
I mean, my very simplified tip that I tell everyone is be shockingly relatable. Because the shock factor is what's going to get you visibility, and you can use that for good or for evil. A lot of people use the shock factor for arguing, for controversial opinions, for conflict. We've seen on Twitter, especially recently, that the shock factor is coming from very graphically violent videos, like murders happening on video, suicides happening on video, because that drives engagement on these platforms. Instead, I say we shock them with relatability, because that's a lot more sustainable and it's a lot more ethical at the end of the day. So you need to tap into your audiences where you understand them, they understand you, and you are so relatable that they see themselves in you. Like, and this can be even as simple as like, do you like coffee or tea? Do you like dogs or cats? Who's your celebrity crush? What fandoms do you follow? Because those little pieces of information about yourself are going to resonate with your target audience. Like, for example, sometimes on TikTok videos, I get comments of like, oh my God, are we the same person? That's the type of reaction you want, because they see them and you, and so they automatically trust you because it's familiar to them, because it's relatable to them. And so that's going to create brand loyalty at the end of the day, which is going to generate your audience and make it bigger.
That's a really cool comment. And I like how we're sort of talking about books, but we're sort of talking about things that are much wider than books.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I don't know, some of the communities that I'm a part of, or some of the people who stand out, and some of the better friends that I have, that quote of, are we the same person? It's like, okay, we're not, but also I was thinking the same thing.
Exactly.
This is why we're friends. This
Yes.
is why we're friends, because we're the only ones laughing at that stupid joke, but it's okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's how our brains are wired. We're evolutionarily wired to support the people we know, like, and trust.
Mhm.
And so therefore, we're going to buy from the people that we know, like, and trust, and we're going to support the people that we know, like, and trust. And so that comes from being shockingly relatable.
Okay, cool. I love that. Like, it works for books, but also just works for life.
Yeah, I mean, it's a foundational concept that a lot of people miss.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to be distracted by the glitz and the glamour, and it's like,
Shiny
oh
object syndrome. Yeah.
yeah, I just need to go to TikTok and like
Yep.
create the next
Yep.
dance or the next
Threads.
ice bucket challenge or whatever Threads is.
Totally.
All of that. But okay. So where you are now,
Mhm.
your business, you're writing books.
Mhm.
Also, you've mentioned that you sell both books that you've written, but also like workbooks, it sounds.
Yeah.
And so can you talk a little more about the workbooks that you're
Totally.
that
Yeah, so I do planners, journals, and workbooks. The journals are very simple. They're just zodiac journals. Like, they're just lined bullet grid blank papers with, you know, the zodiac sign on the front of them, and it has inspirational quotes that are related to that zodiac sign spaced throughout it. So those are kind of more of my more passive income streams. And I just love astrology in general, and I wanted pretty notebooks, and I love journals. So other people like pretty notebooks, and I love journals. So it was like an easy product line to integrate into my business. But for my planners, one is a moon phase planner, where each year I walk through each week of the year and talk about the moon phase, talk about the retrogrades, talk about the seasons that we're in. I'm on the woo-woo spectrum. And so I just got tired of looking all that information up for myself every week. And so I just put it in a dated planner. I'm about to launch 2024s here soon. I just uploaded the files this week. And so that should be ready to go by, you know, the swing of the holiday season when everyone's buying their planners. And then the other one is a self-published author 52-week planner. And that's more of my nonfiction work. That's where I dive into this bridge between business mindset and creative mindset. Because like I said, there's these two camps, right? There's these two groups of people who have these preconceived notions, but there often isn't a bridge between the two. I provide that, because I have been a creative my entire life. I know how the creative brain works really well. And I also have 10 years of entrepreneurship experience, and I founded 4 businesses. So I know how to bridge the gap between, you know, your artwork, your writing, and marketing it as a product, putting up the correct business systems, making sure that you're paying your taxes, you know, making sure that you're copyright protected, like all of these production, marketing, promotion concepts and strategies and systems. And I had all that information in my brain, and people kept asking me these questions, so I put it in a planner.
But in a planner, why didn't you make a coaching program?
Because I don't want to do service work.
That was a joke.
Yeah. I mean, people ask me this question every single week. They're like, oh, you can make a coaching program. Oh, you can do this. And I'm like, I don't want to.
Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate the self-awareness and knowledge. So I think there's a lot of people who are smart and good at what they do, right?
Totally.
can really help anyone create a coaching program.
Exactly.
And there are a lot of people who try to fall into that. And it's like, what if I don't like coaching? And what if I don't like the thing? And they're like, but it's the easiest, that's scalable and time and all the good stuff. But
Right.
I like how you're being integrous. Sure, that's a word.
Yeah.
Integrous to yourself and be like, this is what I want.
Yeah. I mean, a word is just a collection of sounds that have a preconceived meaning attached to them. So integritous can be totally a word, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, my seventh favorite thing is probably making up words.
Yeah.
And if I had a t-shirt making machine, I would have the craziest t-shirts because they'd all have made up words, but maybe like a picture too. That's like, that word doesn't exist, but that picture makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I don't have a t-shirt machine, because it would be weird. Too weird. But cool. Okay, so with what you're doing now, sometimes we tend to see people on Instagram and we see their Instagram version of life. We see their highlights and that's it. So with that, so like currently, are there any current challenges that you're like facing either in the any direction?
Yeah, I mean, the summer slump is always a big one. People don't buy much in the summer. June, July, sometimes August are often the lowest sales months for businesses because people are on vacation. People are dealing with their kids. People are carting their kids to and from summer camps and trying to maintain their sanity when they have several kids with several different sets of activities. So that's one thing that we're going through right now is just the summer sales slump, which is something that I've learned to anticipate over the decade that I've been an entrepreneur. And I can't say that I learned the lesson early on. I had to learn that lesson time and time again. And most Junes, I do fall into a mild depressive episode because of it. But this year, I think I triumphed over it. So I'm feeling pretty good because I saw it coming and I'm okay with it.
Nice.
But it is still depressing to just like go look at my numbers and be like,
That's fair.
But I also know that the holiday season will be big. So that's just like it's just the summer slump. And I just have to like, deal with it.
Okay. Cool.
Which is why emotion regulation strategies are so important.
Emotional regulation, that is so key. Do you have what's one of your favorite strategies in that direction, if that's even a real question?
Yeah, well, when I was looking through your questions earlier this morning in terms of like my favorite self-care activity, I saw that on there. And the answer that I thought of, which is definitely one of my emotion regulation strategies, is end of day dance parties.
Oh.
It's how I reset myself after a long day of work is I put on some brain blasting playlist. Lately, it's just been straight up metal. But I just need to like spend some time either A, dancing around my apartment with my earbuds in, or B, sometimes I just lay on the floor and listen to the music and like just let it wash over me because it produces dopamine in your brain and it's going to like help you reset that emotional mood wherever you are. I really underestimated the effect of music prior to when I started writing full time because I realized how much of an emotional tool music is. Like, not only does it help me tap into the emotional states of my characters, but it also helps me regulate my own emotional states.
Interesting. So like, if you're writing a character and like the character is going through something like a loss or whatever,
Totally.
would you like listen to sad music to like help keep that going?
Yeah. I create playlists for each book that I write. And it's usually like 6 to 7 songs per playlist, and it just tracks the emotional arcs that I'm playing with in that book. And so I usually have like a song about like the character's emotional state at the beginning of the book, the character's emotional state at the middle of the book, and then at the end of the book. And so like I can track that emotional arc a lot more better. And like if I'm writing a certain dialogue scene and I need to tap into that character's point of view a little more deeper, I will put that one song that I've picked for that emotional point in the story and like sometimes listen to it like 5 times in a row before I continue writing the scene, because I just need to like sink down into that emotional state to write it appropriately.
Wow, that's a really cool idea.
It's also fun, you know, like just this morning I was listening to one of my playlists for book, I think it's going to be book 5. I've already created playlists out in advance. And I'm absolutely in love with this character that's going to be the focus for book 5. And I'm kind of like bummed that I can't play with him yet because I have to get through book 3 and 4 first. But he's a really big like punk influenced character. And so his vibe is just immaculate. And so like this morning I was listening to like his portion of the playlist and like Nirvana Smells Like Teen Spirit came on. And like that's how I was able to start my day, on that like, you know, spunky high energy note.
Wow. I love that. I love that because I enjoy music, but sometimes I guess similar to what you were saying about the books that you've been reading, and it's like personal development, this book, business,
Totally.
mindset, and not like fun stories that just, you know, come out of nowhere and may not have any technical benefit, let's say, other than just listening to a good story, which in itself can be like a really great benefit.
I heard something the other day that I'm still processing. So I'll hand it to you and see how you're dealing with it. But I heard that, you know, leisure and work time, right? Leisure isn't technically leisure if it's in reaction to work. So if you're prioritizing leisure time or participating in leisure time as a way to recover from work, as a way to prep for work, as a way to be better at work, it's not really leisure time because it's still in relation to work time. So how can we integrate more leisure time activities in our day-to-day lives that aren't a response to work?
That I like that. I like the idea of that. I like the idea of that. Like, I think last year was my year of coaching. So like I
totally.
like too many coaching programs.
Yeah.
I
did the same
a
thing.
bad strategy. But one coach talked about how people sometimes are just like living for the weekend.
Yeah.
It's like living for vacation. I'm doing all of this because of that.
Totally.
How was your day? It's Friday. Yay, let's go to the bar, right? Like let's balance out based on this.
Yeah.
And he's an authenticity coach, and his idea was like, how can everything you do be like from within instead of like without?
Yeah.
Like inside.
Yeah.
Like I could see that because sometimes it's like sometimes like even stupid things like going to the gym, right? Like, am I going to the gym because I want to like experience the endorphins and I want to like do the thing, or am I going to the gym because it's summertime and I'm going to be on the beach and I don't want people to think of me this way or that way? And it's like sometimes our reasoning, sometimes we don't look at all the reasons for what we do.
Totally.
And like in life and capitalism and many countries, you need work, right? Things are expensive. And sometimes it's just like, I need the money though. So you might be doing something for the money, even if you enjoy doing it, right? Even if you still do it, but like if you're doing it for the money, it might have a different feeling.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, to use a very silly example, recently we've been dealing with the confirmation of aliens from our government, right? They confirmed a few days ago that aliens do exist and that they've seen alien bodies. And most people aren't really caring about this news because we've got more important stuff to care about, like paying our rent. because we are in this capitalist machine. And so there's a lot of memes going around the internet right now of being like, oh, aliens? Oh, well, I still need to work, so it doesn't really matter.
The world is still burning, right? Like
Yeah.
all the things that we're doing right now. And like what are we even gonna do with aliens? We don't even know.
Yeah.
And I guess also I've not even heard this news, but I don't
Oh,
pay attention to the news easily.
yeah. They've
Actually,
done some very official press conferences to confirm that the US government has confirmed interactions with alien bodies
interesting.
and alien aircrafts. And they have some dead corpses of some sort somewhere.
This whole time.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's a good rabbit hole break that I might go on this week in the next few days. Is just let's see what aliens are like, or what does this mean?
Yeah. Apparently the Pentagon is gatekeeping the information. There's a lot going on.
There is. And every so often my like conspiracy theory mind comes into play.
Yeah.
Where it's like, is something else actually going on? And they're like, oh, you know what? It's still the aliens. And if they have a question about this real problem, we'll worry about this.
That's also highly likely.
Yeah. So, okay, just to go back to that one thing, I do like that idea about leisure not being in reaction to work.
Yeah.
Or how do I say it? If we're able to redefine work,
yes,
as not a reaction to bills or not
yes,
a reaction to adulting,
absolutely,
then maybe the leisure will also not be a work time, playtime. It's like,
yeah,
I don't know, lifetime.
yeah,
This is my time. This is for me. This is Justin time, right? And
yeah,
Justin enjoys these types of things, whether he's at work or at play or other parts of life.
absolutely.
So yeah, I think that could be might be an interesting way to see it.
Yeah, I'm still processing it. I'm like, all right, what does that mean though?
Yeah. Like I think that's what a lot of coaching things were last year. It's like, oh, that's a really good idea, but how do I?
Yeah, like
How
what does
do
that
I
mean
make
for
this real?
my day-to-day existence?
Yeah. I still have bills and I still have things to do.
Yeah,
And, even
right.
some of the taking personal responsibility, but
Mhm,
I'm still in groups with other people, right?
mhm.
So like how do I take these lessons that I can see the value in them and then make it reality, and then having both, they say things like high intention and low attachment.
Yeah,
I'm like, I get it, but like I guess that hurts now because I'm like, but the intention comes from the attachment, and I can see that there's a problem there that I might
yeah.
need.
Is it a high intention then?
Yeah, that's something I need to write down now, and I can journal through later, love
Yeah.
myself through later.
My favorite podcasts are the one that feels like therapy. So
that is fair. That is fair. And I guess this is like a nice little self-therapy.
yeah.
Am I too attached to my intention?
The answer is probably yes.
Yep.
I can probably answer that for you.
I mean, I love being human, and I love when situations like that happen, because it's like those people who are like, hey, I don't mean to be mean, but, or I don't mean to be bad person, but. And it's like, hey, the only reason you said that first part of the sentence is because your brain said, hey, I think you're about to be mean.
Yeah.
And you tried to feel better about it. But okay. Come back to where we are here. We are here.
We are queer, talking about aliens.
Right, we are here. We are queer, doing things, which is the backup tagline for this. It's like, I don't know. I'm going to talk to queer people doing things, because I think we all get to do things, and even like with the work and leisure, if we can start more from within, we can see, oh, I'm doing these things for this reason, and I get to continue doing this thing because I like the reason.
How do we center our queerness without tokenizing it?
That is a great question. because I think sometimes it's you have to, I don't know. Like sometimes like part of what it means to be queer is to not be the other thing. So
Yeah.
it's like I don't want to.
Yeah.
But also when I look around society sometimes it's like, what if I read the wrong book that's not like proactively queer, it may not be queer at all. And now I'm just like,
Mhm.
why'd I do this? Or it might be anti-queer once you get into the book.
Yeah.
So it's like you don't want to tokenize the queer experience or a queer story, but at the same time, you want to know if it's going to be. I would rather read a queer story, and I'm sure, for better or worse, like you were saying, there's a gap between queer content and queer production, and I'm sure there are many semi-allies and people who are like, oh, I had a queer character in my book.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but like because it's not clear that it was queer,
And it's more often than not a tokenized character as well.
yeah, and it's just like how do you do all of that? And I think
Mhm.
that's one of the things I wanted to do with this podcast is like I want to talk to queer people who are queer people. I love allies and they are great, but I want to hear more just queer perspectives because we see the world differently because we experience the world differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's helpful. That's helpful. Okay. I had ideas of questions and directions of conversations, but I can sort of start landing the plane. So what's next? What's next for you? What's upcoming in your world for the rest of this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's getting book 2 published for sure. It's in the beta reader stage right now. I just got my first round of edits back from my editor. The cover art should be released today.
Okay.
I
Excited.
saw an email from my cover artist right before I jumped in the Zoom call. So I'm really hoping, because I'm going on vacation next week. So I gave him a little poke. I was like, can I get this by end of day Friday, please? So that's definitely like the biggest thing on my plate right now. The 2024 moon phase planner is another thing on my plate right now. I'm working on 2 different Udemy courses, like making them. I'm going to make one about self-publishing. I'm going to make one just about marketing in general, because that is the most common question that I receive from my audiences, whether they are creatives or business people or anywhere in between. People ask me time and time again about marketing advice. And so I've created a workbook on marketing. I've created a workshop on marketing. I just ran a workshop yesterday. And now I'm creating a Udemy course for it as well, trying to get that information out there. Also, all of the Zodiac journals for the rest of the year. So trying to also just maintain my sanity, I think, is the important in all of those lists.
Yeah, I think that's probably high up on the list.
I mean, there's a reason why I give myself a week off every other month, because I am so highly productive during the weeks that I do work that I need that week release valve in order to maintain my momentum and maintain my functionality, honestly. Like next week, it's going to be a stay-batical is what I call it.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm going to be spending it reading a pile of library books, getting stoned in bed, and playing Sims 4.
All right, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, I
Chill.
think I might deep clean my apartment too. That's kind of, I think I'm gonna do
that
like
sounds
one,
less fun.
I'm gonna do one room a day, because I can do like one room in like half an hour, right? And so if I do it like in the morning, get it out of the way, caffeinated, get it done, and then I can spend the rest of the day being a lump on my couch.
Okay. Awesome. That sounds awesome. Yeah, I'm a little not jealous, but like inspired. Inspired. And take 1 week off every other month.
Yeah.
Just to be.
It's worthwhile. I mean, like, for example, the first 2 weeks that I took this year were full of traveling. Like I went to a conference, I went to go visit to my family back home. So they weren't really like true off weeks, but I try to balance it out throughout the year of being like, all right, this week is completely off. This week is devoted to family. This week is devoted to a conference that I had to go to, So it's not all leisure, but I try to put as much in there as possible.
That's cool. That's cool. And I like how you connected it to maintaining sanity, but I think it's just another theme of that integrousness of
Yeah,
you, where it's
yeah.
like, I know what works for me. I figured things out and I proactively set myself up for that.
Yeah,
Which I think is a lesson in and of itself.
totally. I mean, proactive, like you really underestimate how much better your life can be if you proactively strategize for what you want instead of just reacting to what is given to you.
Yeah. And I think that's back to that leisure and work time, that's the proactive strategy.
Yeah.
Way to
I
get
mean,
that
that's
done.
what manifestation is all about, right? Is like proactively planning for it rather than just waiting for luck to let it fall into your lap.
Yeah, that makes sense. And if you had a planner for it, it would
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
Where would I get a planner from?
No, I don't know.
I heard somebody has them available somehow. Well,
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see.
There might be an efficiency, time, productivity nerd here somewhere.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are they behind me? Probably not. Anyway, okay, so as we start closing this up, I think you've said a number of things that were interesting, but if you had a piece of advice or guiding word of wisdom for either someone who's thinking about book writing or authorship, or just someone who's queer out there who sees something in the world that they might want to change, is there any wisdom you have for them or something that has stayed with you?
Find and nurture your community. Because those are you're going to be the people who support you. And, it takes a village at the end of the day. Like, I think we've forgotten that because America is so individualistic and so autonomous. Like, we love being the lone wolf at the head of the pack, but it's very lonely that way. And that's one of the reasons why we have such a high rate of mental illness in our country. And we have the internet at our disposal nowadays. Yeah. There are billions of people out there that could be your people. So I would encourage you to practice putting yourself out there in a way that could attract your people. A lot of people are afraid of taking that first step, putting themselves out there because they're afraid of the rejection. But think of all of the benefits that can come from it. Like, I found the Book Talk community, which is the book corner of TikTok. And that was my community. They are my people. They love me. I love them. And we speak the same language. And I wouldn't have found them if I hadn't gotten over my stupid pride about using TikTok as an app. I avoided TikTok for years because I thought it was stupid. I thought it was just, pretty girls dancing around pointing at text bubbles, right? But someone finally convinced me to give TikTok a try. This was at the end of 2021 as well. And my entire life is different now. Just because I found that one community.
I wish TikTok would sponsor me, because you should. That's a really great advertisement for TikTok. But also, I think the deeper thing is there about community.
Yeah.
And I do think that, like, when you're on that community, it goes back to what you said earlier. It's like, are we the same person?
Yeah.
Love that. Love that. Also, you said something like, when you're the lone wolf, it's easy to be lonely. And like, I don't think I've ever heard lone wolf and lonely in the same set of time, but that is definitely helpful. All right, so a couple of quick questions.
Yeah.
Rapid fire questions, as some would say. So what is something that inspires you and why?
I'm a big Dungeons and Dragons fan. And there's this particular stream called Critical Role. I don't know if you've come across them at all. They are pretty much the top Dungeons and Dragons stream out there on any platform, but they stream on Twitch. They had a Kickstarter back in 2018, 2019, where they raised $11 million.
Wow.
It was one of the highest grossing Kickstarters of all time, and they now have an animated series through Amazon. And they started out as just a group of nerdy ass voice actors playing Dungeons and Dragons on a Twitch stream back in 2016. And they've grown it to this multi-million-dollar company that is a driving force in the gaming community now. And they are an inspiration to me. Like, not only do I get inspiration from Dungeons and Dragons and the whole, like, a lot of my writing comes from Dungeons and Dragons concepts and stuff like that, but just the people who run Critical Role are also very inspiring for me, watching their journeys and how they have become shockingly relatable and how they have built an ethical, relatable brand loyalty. Like, it's a case study in how to do business correctly.
Okay. I definitely heard of them and got into D&D into the pandemic, and my D&D group was one of my pandemic bubbles. And that was a really great way to finish 2020 for me anyway, but that's awesome. That's awesome. All right. I guess you already talked about self-care.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, so Pride was recent. It's still summer. Do you have any favorite moments from Pride 2023?
Did you come across Patagonia?
I do not think so.
Okay. So the outdoor clothing brand Patagonia, right?
Yeah.
Did a Pride campaign where they had a drag queen go on outdoors adventures in specially designed Patagonia wear. And so her stage name is Patagonia. And she has a very well-developed social media presence now because of that campaign that they ran in June. And she is now doing queer outdoor camp events for queers across the country to go hiking together and be queer together. And it's just beautiful.
It's awesome. Yeah, especially based on some of the other things that happened in Pride season with other sponsorships. It's nice to see some of the good stories.
They did it well. They did it very, very well.
Okay, cool. And then so I like to laugh. So do you have a favorite joke or something that you've recently laughed at?
Most of the things that I've laughed at recently is a bit of Schadenfreude. I don't know if you've come across that term. I don't know if this is going to land well, but I think it will. I was absolutely gleeful. In general, I am gleeful over Gen Z's approach to life. And I think I've kind of coined it as joyful nihilism. I think that's how, like, Gen Z is approaching everything. And I think a perfect example of that is when all the submarine stuff was going on with Titan and the submersible. Someone came out because one of the guy's stepsons who was supposed to go on the trip didn't go on the trip because he wanted to go to a Blink-182 concert instead. And so that came out in the news as all of this was going on. And so someone made a parody Blink-182 song about the submersible being lost. And the line was, "My stepdad's drowning in a submarine, and I don't care because I'm at a Blink show. I'm going to be a millionaire and I didn't do anything," is like kind of like the gist of this parody song that came out. And it was really catchy.
That's fair. That's fair. I wasn't a big Blink-182 fan, but I do remember maybe 6 of their songs are just like, if they were on, I'd be like, oh, I remember this. They had a lot of.
I probably woke up every day for an entire week with it stuck in my head. Is that my stepdad's drowning in a submarine? And I was like, am I a horrible person? Am I a horrible person? It made me laugh a lot.
That's fair. That's fair. I think when I look up aliens, maybe I'll listen to this thing.
Yeah.
There's so many things to do this weekend. Um, but awesome. And then I guess one of my final questions is there a queer change maker, someone who's queer out there in the world, doing things, taking action that inspires you or
Yeah. I don't actually know her name. I should have looked this up before the podcast, but her username is Under the Desk News on TikTok. And she's a queer woman who provides up-to-date news information from under her desk. Like, she literally gets under her desk with a little microphone and gives news updates every single day. And she has been a driving force in advocacy for the younger generations that normally don't get the visibility that we need in lobbyists and going to the political movers and shakers of our country. Like, she's been to Congress multiple times. She has like talked to AOC in New York City, and there's just been a lot of her involvement lately in advocating for people who can't advocate for themselves.
awesome. That sounds interesting. And part of I'm enjoying all of the information I'm getting, and like, I have to look this up, I have to look that up, get some of these books. So I definitely appreciate that, and that's someone I will be looking into. Well, I guess my last question is, if somebody was interested in your workbooks or talking to you or connecting with you, how would they best get in contact?
Yeah, all of my platforms are clairjoyance. So CLAIRJOYANCE. And so you can find me at clairjoyance.com, all of the major platforms. I'm at clairjoyance, or you can look up my link tree where like all of my links are listed. So it's linktree/clairjoyance.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here today. Thank you for sharing so many different things, whether it's books or mini therapy sessions or interesting jokes and songs that I get to look up later. This was a fun time, and I hope that listeners will be able to take some of what you're saying and, do the next step. And yeah. At the worst case, separate leisure from like leisure, not in response to work.
Absolutely.
Someone's going to figure that out, and then they can actually let us know. And then it's like, oh, okay, that's how I make this real and practical.
Yeah. Even if it's 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, it's worthwhile just doing something that has no benefit at all.
We can all be better for that, maybe, I think.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Queer Changemakers podcast. I'm your host, Justin Mezzatine, and I hope that you're able to learn from what you just heard and think of ways that you yourself can also make change in your community for the better. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.